Hi, and welcome back to Continual. I'm going to be your host, Jim Nettles, and tonight we're going to be talking all about technology and how you work it into writing. And we're going to be covering technology, I think, from old school all the way to the future. But before we get started tonight, let's go around and see who all has joined us here. So, Patrick, you're up first.
Hi, I'm Patrick Dugan. I am the author of the Darkest Storm series and the Watchers of Asteria. I am a computer programmer by day and a writing gadget and software pro on the weekends. So that is why I'm here.
Jenny?
Hi, I'm Gini Koch. I write the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series for dog books. I also write under a variety of pen names in every length and every genre. And in a great many of the things I write, particularly the Alien series, I have a lot of technology. That's fun.
Les?
Yeah, hi, I'm Les Johnson. I am a science fiction writer. Most of my science fiction is published by Baen Books. I also write popular science books. I've got one coming out in October from Princeton Press. So I tend to write a lot about science and science fiction. By day, I guess some people would say I'm kind of living science fiction because I do work for NASA, and I've got a payload getting ready to fly in space this August. So I'm pretty pumped. But I'm not representing my employer here tonight. I have to say anything I say is just me.
But we are looking forward to seeing those solar sails. Ari?
I'm Ari McKay, and I write in the LGBTQ romance genre primarily, but I write action-adventure fiction, spy thrillers. And as Rachel Angela, myself and my writing partner write urban fantasy. And we use a lot of technology in our spy thrillers. And I'm also a systems engineer, retired now, and I spent over 30 years working for the Defense Department. So I got a lot of background in tech.
And Jean?
I'm Jean Rabe. I write all sorts of genres, and currently I'm writing the Piper Blackwell Mystery Series, and I put tech in all of my books.
So let's kind of start with the easy question, because out of the gate we may as well. So when you're looking at creating fiction and creating story, how do you decide how much tech to work in, how detailed the tech is, how hard, how soft? And again, a lot of this is going to be the answer, it depends. And this is why, with such a diverse panel, I want to talk about your take. What is it for you that determines, for a particular story, what are your gauges that come in and say, this needs to be hard, this needs to be soft? And how do you define your hard versus your soft fiction and those elements? So, Patrick, I'm going to throw it to you first.
It depends. So really it comes down to what does the story need. If you're like Darkest Storm, there's a lot of tech in it, but it's mostly hand-wavium because that is not, I'm not writing hard science fiction, so I tend to stay away from the long, drawn-out descriptions and the technical accuracies because the group of YA superhero readers aren't really looking for detailed definitions of technology.
Jenny?
It depends. But honestly, for me, it doesn't depend that much. I am completely capable of writing hard science fiction, but I don't want to. I enjoy reading it. Les's stuff is awesome, and that scratches that itch for me. I don't want to do it myself. So I have a tendency to, it's a spatio-temporal war filtered through black hole technology. But I can get away with it because the people saying this are aliens from other planets who are more technologically advanced than Earth. So they can do things we can't, though some distances still require time and all these other things. For my Belters series of interconnected short stories, that's set in the belt in the future, and that's far more tightly tied to real science fiction and real science. But again, I don't want to have to tell you how to build the spaceship and how it runs. I want to get to the action and the adventure and the fun and the jokes and things flowing up real good. So for me, I want to make sure that it's not utterly ridiculous. I don't want, I don't want people going, well, that is just, I don't want someone who knows nothing about science going, that's just ridiculous. Because anyone who knows something about science will be throwing up. So I want to keep the science there. For the Alien series is a very soft science fiction series. I practically have a degree in astrophysics from it now, because I have to do so much research on the galaxy, not just the solar system, everything. So how long can it take? What's the closest star? What's the next closest star? So, but none of that, my readers don't want to read that. They just want to know the next fun thing that's happening. So I work it in, and that's, I think, part of what you were asking. It's very dribbled. The science is there. I can spin around and defend it if I need to, but for the most part, it's very dribbled and it's very mild, because that's not why someone's reading me. They're not going to read me for the same reason that they're going to read Les, whose science is right on all the time. And that's okay, because there's room on the shelves for everyone, and sometimes you feel like a nut and sometimes you don't.
So Les,
it really does depend. No, when I write, I just remember what I enjoy reading. I want to be entertained. I want to have a good story, and I like stories that are not so far in the future that the tech is indistinguishable from magic. I like to write stories that are far enough in the future that it's still a what if, but it's all about the character. The side of me that comes into the hard science fiction is I write a lot of space adventure, and I don't want to violate laws of physics for the same reason Jenny said, because believe me, if I do, my readers will let me know. Okay. And so I really do strive to have it in the background. But, if you're writing space adventure, space and the technology of space is kind of integral to the story. And it's kind of the ultimate, human versus nature, call of the wild kind of thing, where nature's out to kill you at every step. And what's keeping you alive is the tech. And part of the drama is the tech may not work right all the time, right? So I do that. But when I took my first foray into space opera, with a book I published with Bain last year called The Space-Time War. And it was more of a classic space opera where the explanation and the technical background kind of took secondary. I still didn't get loosey-goosey with the physics, but I definitely got loosey-goosey with, the engineering and the reality of how easy it might be to do that. So it really does depend. And of course, when I write a popular science book, which is not science fiction, I really want to make it understandable and accessible to the average reader, and the tech has to be right, but you can't, even in there, you can't go into a lot of detail, because a lot of people who want to read popular science, you lose them, just like you would in a science fiction novel if you put in a big data dump. So you really have to be careful, and it's difficult for me. That's why everyone needs a good editor.
How about you, Ari?
So yes, it does depend. And I think very much like Jenny said, especially since I write primarily in the romance genre and the tech is kind of even tertiary, but since I love the tech and I read a lot of hard science fiction, I try to make it all very based in reality. I'm married to a physicist, I'm an engineer, and so everything that I put in especially as far as the spy tech goes, has got to have a realistic grounding. And it's not even so much that the readers will know or care, because I'm sure they would not care if I hand waved it at all. But I care, and I'm very OCD about it. And so my husband and I have had long, long conversations about exactly what you can do with a GPS signal, and what information you can get off of it. So yeah, it depends, but I try to keep it as real as I possibly can.
Jean?
I love tech, and I'm not a scientist, but I know scientists. My husband's a chemist, so that helps. But I like to take a piece of tech, today's tech, and I like to wrap an entire book around this piece of tech. I read an article that people were able to hack 2 models of pacemakers and were killing people. because they were able to turn the pacemakers off or to get them going at an irregular beat. And I was like, no, that can't be real. Mm-hmm. But I studied it, and I made calls. And indeed, it's true. And the companies don't produce these two particular types of pacemakers anymore. But I was so fascinated by it that I made my murder victim have one of these pacemakers, and I built the tech of the story around this whole little fact that, of course, you don't discover until the end. But it's real technology that can cause awful things.
Well, and I think that's one of the places I kind of want to start. Let's start with kind of the dystopian, disastrous end of things, because it's often not about when the tech works. Star Trek built multiple series about the fact of when tech fails. So let's look a little bit and talk about how do we challenge technology. And I mean, because a lot of the time we will wrap story around it, whether it's steampunk and the fact that your gear freezes at the wrong moment, or, you know, the hyperspace drive will not work, or something along these lines, or somebody has hacked the car that you're driving in and locked you out of the ability to control it. You know, data security is important, as we've discovered, because apparently there's unethical actors. So, Jenny, when you're crafting it, how often is it really the convenient failure of technology that lets you build the drama? And how do you like to play with the failure?
It depends. I think we're all going to start every question. It depends. In my New West series, the series comes about, that's me writing Z.E. Stanton, and it's dystopian, set in a future where there's been a solar flare that has wiped out all of the all electronics, and everybody in this future world is already in domes that are all run by computers. So everything slags, all the meds release at once. Basically plagues are created, monsters are created from all of this stuff. And yes, scientifically looked at Betelgeuse going over, and its supernova coming over, and everybody's saying, oh, it can't hurt. But if it did, that's the next very likely phase. So from a dystopian standpoint, yes, all the stuff had a slag in order for this story to work, and this series to work, because it's how people are dealing without electronics. They've literally been thrown back into the old West times, but with no desire to ever go back to the future of getting electronics, because it has just destroyed the world. And everybody, it's been a couple hundred years since then, but everybody still, they don't remember necessarily what it was like, but they know it betrayed them. But in the Alien series, which is a present day series, that's where I have hackers and good guys and bad guys, and they do hack in, and they do cause trauma, and they do save the day or hurt the day or whatever, because I just think that's, these days, I mean, that's just a part of our life now, that we have people whose entire idea of fun is to go in and mess up everybody's email, or take down a bank, either for fun or just for maliciousness or for anarchy. So from a dystopian standpoint, I think we have a lot of that going on today. But I don't write a lot of dystopia. I can, but I really want to believe there's hope. So even in my dystopian, there's hope. There's hope for all that. But yeah, I think you can get a lot from the collapse of tech. And then how do you do something new? What old ways? You know, they still have guns in the New West series. They're more important than ever, honestly. And yes, it's set in America, and so forth. But all of these things can affect us. I mean, if Canada went down earlier this week, their system was taken out. I have friends there who were like, I can send you one text, everything's gone, right? this is a major country in 2022, and it was massively negatively affected. So if you take that just one tiny step farther, it's very easy to create a terrible situation that is instantly relatable to your readers. And
it doesn't have to be full-blown dystopia, but I mean that kind of jokingly. But I mean, when we go create tech disasters, I mean, the failure of it, whether it's just something that affects the person, the ship, whatever the case may be. So Les, how about for you? I mean, when technology fails, and like you mentioned, you write a lot about space. When technology fails in space, you have a bigger problem than you would have if your ship is sitting on the ocean and it fails, which is a bigger problem than you would have if your car fails on the highway. So for you, what is it about when technology fails?
Well, it can be spectacular in a bad way. Your question has actually caused me to reflect on the fiction that I have written, and almost all of my novels have some element of us people being let down by technology, or there being some malfunction of technology out there. From the first novels I wrote about moon and asteroid exploration, and a stranded Chinese ship was a failed technology on the moon. I had to be rescued, to the mission to Metheny, where there's a sentient robot that in a classic war, berserker style war, forgets which side it's on, right? So that's kind of a technology failure. And it's actually kind of embarrassing, because I think all of the fiction I've written at this point involves some kind of technology failure in the middle of it. But what's important about that is the fact that these machines are built by people, and people are fallible. People are malicious, as Jenny was saying. Sometimes we're subject to bad actors who cause bad things to happen. And we have to realize that these systems that we build and we rely on are not going to work all the time, and we need to be thinking about how we react to that. One of the things that I have not written about, that I am suddenly much more leery of than I used to be in the past, is this whole notion of the human-machine interface. I used to think it would be really nice to take my phone and have it all digitally accessible and be able to access the net. Until I started realizing what the media currently is doing to us in the way they report the news, whether you're on the left or the right. I don't know how you can really trust what you're hearing from the gatekeepers on everything. And I would hate the thought that somebody's controlling the input that goes directly into my neural systems, right? So there's a part of me that is getting increasingly skeptical of some of the science fictional future that I used to look forward to. Electric cars and the grid. Well, is that going to be tied into somebody's, every time the president changes, the politics of the people are controlling what happens with regard to my use of energy or whatever. It's a scary thought, and I'm suddenly no longer a fan of just wildly embracing every new technology that's out there. And I think we as science fiction writers need to do more exploring of that, because I think we need to be making the thought excursions of what do we do when bad things happen and the technology we depend on fails or is taken off. So I'm not a pessimist. I'm an optimist. I think we can overcome, but I think we have to realize we're going to have problems every step of the way. It's just because we're human.
How about you, Ari?
Well, one of the stories that I wrote, it's actually one of the first ones I ever wrote, was basically the whole entire plot was around the failure of technology, where it wasn't even something spectacular like a space battle. What it was that somebody was in a very remote area of the world, and they were kayaking, and there was a flash flood, and their satellite phone got trashed. So this person had to, and most of the book is this person trying to extract himself and the person he is watching out of a jungle in the middle of nowhere, and with literally no technology. And these are, very technology-based people. And it's like, this was, something where it's like when you put all of your eggs in one basket, and that basket is suddenly gone, then you're very much in trouble. But that is something that, as a writer, is a very fascinating thing to be able to do, because you don't have to have the whole dystopia. You don't have to have anything. You can take and send an individual literally back into the Stone Age, where he's got, you know, a machete and it's him against the jungle, just because he doesn't have a satellite phone to call for extraction.
Well, let's be honest. We spend half our time just trying to destroy the cell phone so that the story has to keep going. How about you, Gene? And you're on mute.
I was on mute because my dogs were barking. I was very fortunate to have a bank employee sit down with me and explain how you could hack into a bank and how you could steal assets and all sorts of interesting, horrible things. So my idea of tech failing is this wonderful system like banks or hospitals or whatever, which is being defeated by higher tech, more intricate tech that like little serpents wriggles into holes, punches holes in what we think is something sound and turns it into Swiss cheese. So in one respect, that's tech failing. And it happens, and it's real, and it continues to happen every day. But it's also tech succeeding in what it was trying to do. So to me, it's kind of an interesting, it's a clash of forces of technology. And you could, you know, one's not good, one's not evil. It's how they're being manipulated by the forces of good and the forces of evil. Or
at the end of the day, a computer is a tool. Software is a tool. And I mean, pretty much the idea of computer viruses came from Bell Labs and, hey, whose program can eat the others first? So, I mean, that's often the case. So, Patrick, how about you?
I have a lot of tech in a lot of my books, but in my Steampunk series, Watcher of Hysteria, it's a lot more personal because Quinn loses an arm. And so he has to build himself a replacement arm in order to function as an artificer and a blacksmith. So, you know, he gets into situations where, like, the arm comes detached and he can no longer use that arm, and it's just hanging there by his side. And, you know, when you're in the middle of a fight, you know, that makes it really difficult when, you know, your primary arm does not work anymore. So, you know, a lot of the story revolves around, you know, times when his arm actually fails or it just gets pulled off, you know, because in fights, random things happen. So it's a lot more, you know, that in that case, it's a lot more personal, a lot more in your face, because you're watching this and you're rooting for him, I hope. And, you know, and all of a sudden, like, he can't fight. And, you know, most of his gadgets that he's built are in that arm. So now he's got to just use his brain and his left arm to get himself out of situations, which makes the story a lot more easy, you know, or a lot more entertaining, because you don't have the easy way out.
So let's start kind of diving down the fun path here. So looking at different technology, because, you know, for the most part, when we're incorporating tech into a story, it's because whether we're writing about the Old West, writing steampunk, writing about the future, even modern day, a lot of the time it's looking at a piece of technology and then extrapolating it or modifying it to meet what we need in the story. So Les, what's one of the favorite things that you've gone, found, researched, and worked into a story? And also, how did you do the research and decide what of those elements are going to make it in?
Yeah, I love this story. I hope it's not too long. In my day job, right? I mean, I've got this mission that's going to launch using a solar sail to go do reconnaissance of an asteroid. And early in the project, we were doing these meetings that are risk management meetings. And it's really kind of fun initially, because all the engineers and scientists get in a room and they make a list of all the things that can go wrong, right? And then you figure out how you fix these things, or what you can do and how much it's going to cost, and whether you can fix it, what the risk level is, et cetera. And one of the asteroids that was a candidate asteroid, our our guy who does the mission trajectory planning said, well, there's a chance that this asteroid is not really an asteroid, that it's an old Saturn V booster. And we might spend all this money and send this high-tech spacecraft out there and turn on the camera and see USA. So we're all thinking, we got to make sure that doesn't happen, right? So we had to make sure that was not the target we were going for, and it turns out it's not. So we're not really at risk of that. But I immediately tuned out. It was late in the day, and my mind was racing because it immediately came to me, well, what if we're in the future and we have a company that's mining asteroids to supply some nascent infrastructure in space, and they've got these little reconnaissance craft out surveying asteroids to see which ones to mine. And they're used to finding asteroids, but in fact, when they go to this one asteroid, it's not an asteroid. It's an old spacecraft, 30,000-year-old spacecraft, and it's not from Earth, right? And so it's one of those moments where the tech and a realistic planning for a technology mission at work spawned an entire thought that led to a novel. I have no idea what happened in the rest of that risk management meeting. I probably should have gone back and amended my time card and put 2 hours of vacation at the end of that day because I was totally, zoned out after he said that. So to me, there's an interplay. That doesn't happen very often, but it's probably one of the few books out there that's been inspired by a risk management meeting.
No. This is called scenario planning for what in case.
So anyway, that's the closest I have to how that crossover happens and such.
How about you, Ari?
So some of the best research that I ever got was, since I worked with a lot of military people, and specifically I worked with a guy who had been an air traffic controller on the Theodore Roosevelt. And he had so many stories about things, about the tech that they used, because let's face it, a lot of that is, or at least it was as of a few years ago, very classified. And so I was in a position where I was trying to write a tech story that had to deal with, detecting airplanes and, how you'd find the airplane. And, here I am like, okay, I have to make sure that I don't put anything classified that this person has told me the story at work. And so that's been kind of, a balancing act that I've had to do, is, I try to keep, what I learned from work. Unlike Les, I can't put what I learned at work into my stories, and I have to make sure that I actually, go, in a kind of a different direction around. So it's like, okay, I know this, and I know this would work, and I can't use that. So let me, go around the issue and do something completely different out of left field. So it takes a lot of research, because, if I know I can't go down a path, then I have to find an alternate path. So that's been kind of an interesting challenge.
So, Gene, how about you? What's a case of something that you were looking at, working on, and playing with it? I need something that does X. What's one of the favorite things you kind of, whether it was research or whatever else, that you pulled a rabbit out of the hat? How'd you get to it, and what's this piece of tech that you were playing with?
That's my current project right now. And what you made me do, Jim, is realize that I don't use tech for any good purpose. Beyond Googling or searching on a computer, all my uses of tech involve murdering a character or multiple characters or, laying down a whole city block.
I'm here for you. I'm here to be in service.
I just need to fix that. So my current thing is I start researching. This is awful. I start researching how to burn down buildings, of course, without leaving evidence or getting caught. And I know kind of where to search, because back in the day when I was a news reporter, I went through some arson training courses and worked with an arson investigator for the state of Kentucky. So I discovered that there are devices that you wouldn't think could be on a timer, little pieces of tech. You can put a timer on a road flare, and you can stick it in a gallon of gasoline, and you can put it on something that you want to burn, and it doesn't leave enough evidence to tell what it was, because in the explosion, the flare goes away, the little piece of tech goes away, and you might have some pieces of the gasoline canister, but that's kind of to be expected. But putting a timer on a flare? I mean, that's amazing. And I know that's just a little thing, just an itty bitty thing. But that whole thing sparked my research into other ways that you can set up timing devices. And this isn't old stuff. This is like right today. And it's scary and itchy and uncomfortable and fascinating.
Well, it's often the little things that it's the little details. It's the little tech a lot of the time that comes into play.
Did that answer your question?
Oh, yeah. So, Patrick, how about you?
Well, I'm a computer programmer and tech guy during the day. So I was working with a group of guys who were mostly ex-CIA and Navy SEALs doing physical penetration and data. How do they phrase it? They were making sure that your data didn't get stolen, by people coming into your office. And I was the one who was doing the penetration testing. So they were giving me the lowdown on everything. And so I was writing Darkest Storm at the time, and one of the kids, Marcel, is a tech genius. That's his superpower. And so they have to get into a building that is completely cut off from all outside sources. So no internet, no, it's got its own power, it's got its own water, and they had to get in to that building. And so I was working with these guys, and I'd be like, so what would you do? And so I heard a lot of things that really make you twitchy. You're like, oh, that actually works. So I worked, I'd bounce ideas off those guys because they actually knew how it worked in the real world. And so then a lot of it, they were like, you can't use that. I'm like, yeah, I get that. We don't want to teach people how to do this through reading science fiction novels. So, but it was a really interesting challenge to come up with, how exactly would you get into a building that was completely hardened against outside penetration and then get into it. So that took a little bit of research, and that got a lot of really interesting stories that made me, stay up at night.
Jenny, how about you?
I love research because you find the most interesting things while you're researching. And this has been true for me from day one with writing. I'll always find something. I'm looking over here in research A, but it finds something that just I can go off on a whole different tangent. Technologically, specifically, I probably am currently having the most scientific fun with the Belcher series, because again, it's a far future, but it's far future in our solar system. And I needed a Amazium. Okay, I needed something that would be a strike of the highest order in asteroid mining. And through desperate searching, because you can only call it Amazium until you need to turn it in, and then you have to have a real name. I discovered that phosphorus is possibly the most important thing out there, and it could absolutely be found in the asteroid and everything else. So I've done a tremendous amount of research into our solar system, including how vast it is. I mean, you start thinking it's small. It's small because it's ours, and everything else. It's gigantic. The asteroid belt is unbelievably huge. So I think it's much bigger than we can grasp. It's similar to the first time you ever see the Grand Canyon in person. You look out and your mind says, what a beautiful painting that is. Because the depth and the distance just doesn't seem possible. And it's just, so much more. So I've really, really enjoyed all the research I've done for the Belters has absolutely affected each and every story I've written for it in different ways. So I really like the research. The biggest danger of research is that it is fun and it is interesting. And you find I actually have to control myself, because if I find my answer, I need to stop and not keep reading the 50 other articles that are so interesting, because then you don't get anything written. But yeah, so for me, I'll go with phosphorus is really important. And being mined as something that I know it's an element, but it was something that technology needed, and it needed for food and everything else. So all of that. It's all fun. There's never a time researching anything, regardless of genre, where I'm going to go, researching that was just such a slog. It's like, it was so interesting. Right? So it's just fun.
So, kind of looking at, tech overall, because again, this is all encompassing. I mean, everything around us is technology. I mean, whether it goes back to being the knife and the arrow, to the laptop sitting here on my desk, to anything else. I want to talk now a little bit about watch the news, watch the articles, watch the things that are coming out, and see about how you might be able to take those to inspire a story. One of the things that's flying around a lot right now is, somebody at Google comes out and says, oh my God, the AI is sentient, and it's coming back and it sells it self-aware. Well, since it's Google, the first question I have is, what's it trying to sell me? But that's neither here nor there. And I have my own questions about that particular thing. But it does bring up ideas of stories that I've worked on in the past and whatnot, this idea of, when does the technology become sentient? So looking at news stories, articles, things that are flying by right now, what are the things that have grabbed you that you're like, oh yeah, this is going into my research pile, that this may have to become a story? How about you, Ari?
Well, it's not so much the news, but the fact that I work at DEF CON in the biohacking village, which is why Gene stuff appeals to me so much, because when you were talking about the pacemaker, we actually run a lab where people can come and hack. And you have to have people sign waivers that if they go in there and they have any kind of medical device on them, that they're subject to being hacked. And so there's a lot of stuff in the biohacking arena where I have seen people who have chips implanted in them. And I know people who have, there was one girl who put a computer board, she had it implanted in her thigh. So the whole thing about now we're getting to where cyborgs are actually going to become a thing. This is something that is very near future. And I'm not even sure that it's going to be the medical arena doing it. It's going to be the hackers, because they have absolutely no, bounds for themselves about what they can do to their bodies. And you would not believe the things I have seen at the biohacking village. And, that's the kind of thing that I think is inspiring me, at least, when you start wondering about, where does that dichotomy come in between what's human, what's not human, what's transhuman. And the whole transhuman movement is fascinating. And I think that has a lot of potential for stories in the near future. And I know we've already had a few, I guess like all the way going back to like $6 Million Man and stuff like that. But that is actually coming, and it's coming soon. And it's got a lot of dangers to it, as Jean found, with her research, that, there's going to be people who have it, and there's going to be people who are going to try to damage it. And I think that that's going to be a really, really fruitful area for fiction very soon.
Now you're making me want to come back to DEF CON. It's been a
Oh,
while.
you got to come back. Come back. You can see me.
Gene, how about you? And you're on mute.
Outside of my fire delve, which has me utterly fascinated, I read an article today that they've transplanted pig hearts into recently or brain dead bodies, and these hearts are still going. And I know that's technology. It's not mechanical pieces like so much of our technology talks about, but it is technology. And I want to do something, I don't know, short fiction maybe, but it's real and it's scary. It's wonderful. It's scary. Is it dehumanizing us? What does it say to us as a people who will genetically alter pigs for the purpose of killing them and harvesting their hearts to put into people? I'm finding this current pig heart thing fascinating and troubling, and I'm wondering if it's just the tip of this technology that they're looking at now. I know it's not just hearts they're looking at. They've got to be looking at other things.
Well, you can look into the experiment they did recently about reviving dead pigs. And
I didn't read that.
Yeah, where part of what they did was they very intentionally introduced things that would actually block the potential for them to regain consciousness or sentience, but they were able to restore pigs from an abattoir to a certain level of cognitive processing. So you might want to take a look at that one too if you really want to be disturbed.
Dead.
So they're making zombie pigs.
Zombie
Wow.
pigs.
No, that's
Just because you
technology.
can science, doesn't mean you should.
How about they?
Yeah. But anyway, you asked, what is it that's fascinating me right now? And it's fascinating and disturbing me.
Well, that's part of the important part.
Yes.
So, Patrick, how about you? What's the latest thing you're seeing that's grabbing your attention and screaming for a story?
A lot of it is around the social engineering stuff that's going on with like the big data, Cambridge Analytics. Basically kind of like Les was saying earlier, I don't know that I want CNN piping stuff into my brain or Fox News or anybody else. It's that, and it's coming down to more of the haves and have-nots. And you start to look at like, what does that look like as we extrapolate on into the future? The social structures that are being built around, the bastions of left and right, that you just have to, wonder, you start looking at like that going forward into the future, how does that play out, and what is it going to take to stop that, which in a lot of cases, you start looking at, massive disasters, or alien invasion or something to, that would force everybody to drop, the pretenses and, be forced to work together. And so, because, that's just scary, but it's fascinating to watch the marketing really of facts or, alternate facts to drive a narrative that may or may not be true. And so I've been playing around a lot with that in my head lately, just with everything that's going on. If, how do you, manage that in a long-term scenario where you're hundreds of years into the future?
Jenny, how about you? What is it from the headlines that you're wanting to put into a byline?
The Alien series, I have a lot of fans who tease me that I'm reporting, I'm not writing fiction. And so what I actually look for are scientific articles that support things I've written, like the multiverse and that black holes are connected and things like that. And there's always something. And so, but I've already written it. So I'm looking for stuff to support my hypotheses versus anything else. I try to avoid the news because it's really depressing and it stresses me out. And depressed Ginny doesn't write well. Angry Ginny does, but if I'm depressed, it's like, ugh. All I want to do is hide. I don't want to write. So really, my grandmother was huge into hard science fiction, and she said she was reading because she wanted to see the future, and she felt anything that man could imagine, man could create. And I agree with that. So I kind of look at it as my job is to be imagining, and then, you know, along the way, someone else will come and create it. But yeah, I try to avoid the news. I'm looking for cool, quirky science things that support things I'm doing, or things I've already written, or things that are written that aren't published yet. Versus, hey, that's inspiring, because I don't need that though. Now I just kind of want Jean to call me every day and tell me what she's found, because all of her stuff has been fascinating. Like, I just want Jean to tell me what she's discovered. I'll write things without that. So that's pretty much me. Honestly, I would rather read the books everybody else is writing than the news. I'd much rather see what everybody else is thinking, because it's going to be way more interesting and could possibly even have a happy ending.
Les, how about you?
Well, I have to agree with Jenny. I'd rather read a book than watch the news. Unfortunately, I feel obligated to watch the news, but I'll tell you, I escape as quick as I can into a book. I think the pace of technology has made it difficult for us. And the reason I say that is I look back at what was science fiction when I was in college and what's reality now. Things like CRISPR, genetic engineering, right? On the cheap, right? It's happening all over. We have computers now that are more capable than what Isaac Asimov was able to envision to run, Trantor, the seat of the galactic empire. And our computers already surpass probably what he thought was going to be possible in that time frame, or even what Star Trek envisioned, right? So there are so many things that have happened that have just overtaken us. I think my head is still swimming trying to catch up with this science fictional world that we're in. And so when I look at it, I really, I can just give an example of a technological spin in 2004, two scientists discovered this new material called graphene. And graphene is the strongest, most electrically conductive, it's a single atomic layer thick element of carbon that is 300 times stronger than steel by weight. And they discovered it in pencil lead, right? So they get a Nobel Prize in 2010. And so if you look at all the things that can be done with graphene, it enables space elevators. Previous to this material being discovered, when you'd ask people who are advocates of building Arthur C. Clarke's space elevator, what's it made from? They would say unobtainium, right? Didn't exist. It doesn't. We just don't know how to make it in big enough quantities to build a space elevator, but it exists, right? So for me, it's a whole smorgasbord of things that we're living in that science fictional future. All the stuff we heard about transhumanism and cyborgs. I think, Ari, you were talking about cyborgs. It's now, right? So we need to be, I think, doing entertaining stories that explore the ramifications, in many cases, of the world in which we live, which is really a science fictional world.
So kind of one of the last things I want to hit on, there's two things, but the first one here is I want the view of also where technology can be hopeful, because we've talked about, this is when the ship fails. This is how I used to blow up the world. This is the fun stuff, is creating the destructive elements. What about the other side of it? What's the thing that you would like to explore in more hopeful ways? The piece of technology for you that, if we look at Solarpunk, the thing that could potentially help transform. What's the idea you would like to explore that potentially could have that other side of things? Not only does it not create necessarily the drama the same way, maybe it's also the thing that inspires the positive change in what we're doing going forward. And I realize as writers, this goes, kind of being the antithesis of what we want to do. But, let's go with the idea that we can have a little fun that way too. So, Gene, if you were to look at a piece of positive technology and how it could come and influence, what's the thing you'd like to look at and say, because we can all spin any piece of technology and make it blow up the world. But what's one thing you'd like to explore that maybe would be that positive, help the world grow sort of thing?
I want a transporter. I want a transporter.
Second the motion. I've traveled.
Forget the airplanes that are caught, they can crash. Give me a transporter. I'll buy the ticket. It'll just get me from point A to point B. I'll pay the money. I don't have to fly. I covered too many plane crashes when I was a news reporter, and it's instant. So you don't have to spend the hours. You don't have to spend 24 hours on a plane to get to Australia. So give me the transport. Since you're saying, pie in the sky, what do you want? Now, I suppose they could find a way to use it for war, but you're saying positive. And for me, that would be a positive. Sign me up for the Bahamas.
Yeah, but then they'd still charge you for your bag.
Matter transformation fees. All right, Patrick, for you, what's that positive piece of tech?
And the history of science fiction goes against me, but it's robotics, where manual labor is no longer needed, and people can just do the things they love to do instead of going to work every day. Maybe a less intense Wall-E, where you are able to really just chase what you love instead of chasing a paycheck.
Jenny?
Well, Gene, in my Alien series, I have gates, and they do exactly what you want. There's no charge for the luggage either, but you have to be working for Centaurian Division to get these. So it's out there in my series already. And Patrick, I am more suspicious of a utopia than I will ever be of a dystopia. I think Demolition Man taught me everything I ever needed to know about what utopias would really be like. So I don't trust them, because I also think if humans have nothing to strive for, I think we become indolent. I think we turn into Wall-E much more than we turn into Star Trek. But as for this is a personal thing, and I say it every time, where's my jetpack? We were promised jetpacks in the 50s before I was born, and we still don't have them. And I realize they're probably really stupid, but I still want one. I want one, preferably with a good helmet. But, where's the jetpack? But it's not something, it's funny, it's something I always joke about, but I literally cannot figure out a way to make one work intelligently in stories. So I assume that's why we don't have them, because they're not really a great idea. But I think we should have them. Technically, motorcycles, skateboards, and surfboards aren't a great idea either, and yet we can have fun with them. So.
You can get a jetpack. It's just going to carry you for 52 seconds or something like that.
I want one that actually does something besides drop you on the ground.
Les, how about you? What's your piece of hopeful technology?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm thinking along the lines of Patrick, but not with robots. I think we'd alleviate a lot of human suffering if we had a device that would let me get my Earl Grey hot, a replicator, right? So people would not have to worry about food and the necessities of life, and you could just take the raw materials and create whatever you need. Now, it would completely destroy economics, right?
Synthahol does not do it for me. Sorry.
But I think that would be probably the most transformative technology in terms of the human experience and alleviating suffering in the world, is if we had that kind of capability. So that would be it.
All right.
Nootropics. So the ability for everybody's mind to be, as brilliant as it possibly can. I mean, that's where all these ideas are going to come from, is the smarter that we get, and the more that we're able to do with that intelligence, it's going to give rise to things that will be our science fiction, that will be, what we have science fiction now is, faster than light travel, replicators, matter transmitters. I think that nootropics is going to be the field in the near future that's going to drive that.
All right, so I've got a speed round question. Because at the end of the day, every story is about the people. It's about the characters. It's about the journey they go on. When we look, we see a lot of stuff changing now with transhumanism. We look at how the technology works or fails for our characters. If we look at things in many of the spy thrillers, it's the gadget that works that pulls us out at the last minute. But at the end of the day, every story is still about the characters. What do they do? What do they go through? So just very quickly, what's the one thing we do to make sure that we're still balancing the tech and the gadgets and just the MacGuffins and the things that we want to play with to make sure we don't bury our characters? Who wants that one first? Don't make me.
I'll jump in. All in.
Right.
But I want to preface it with one little piece of advice for writers. My friend Andre Norton told me to subscribe to Popular Mechanics, and I thought, what? And she says, you're right. You write science fiction, you write fantasy, you write mystery. Subscribe to Popular Mechanics. One of the best pieces of advice she gave me. It is filled with all sorts of interesting techie stuff, and it's not just mechanics. So anyway, I get a lot of my ideas from there. So the human and the tech thing. I go to an Amish restaurant not too far from here, and I like to talk to some of the waitresses, about, I'm nosy, what it's like to be Amish. And she said, well, Amish people do not pray to technology. And I was like, huh? She says, look, and she points around the restaurant, and there are these people, she's absolutely spot on. There are people sitting in 4s and 6s at a table, and they're not talking to each other. They have their faces down, looking at their cell phones. They're out to breakfast at this wonderful Amish buffet, and they're looking at their cell phones. And she says, we do not pray to technology. And I think it's kind of a neat piece of advice that she gave me. Don't ever pray to technology. And humanity and the people that are sitting around you, they're far more interesting than any gadget you have. Did that answer your question?
I think so. Anybody else have anything they want to add?
I don't remember the question.
Well, how do we make sure that we don't lose the humanity or the kitty catness of our characters in playing with the technology?
Well, since my main character, my main series is Kitty Cat, technology, just like anything else, should be used in a way that serves the story. And like you said, the story is character driven. Readers attach to good characters. That you're put in situations that they have to work to get out of, basically, or get into, depending on what they're going for. And all the tech in the world doesn't make that interesting. A character people root for makes it interesting. So I enjoy doing the tech. I enjoy doing all the research. I enjoy doing all the stuff. But when it comes down to it, if Kitty or Victoria or Nap or anybody else in any of my stories, they are the ones, they have to figure out how to use the technology. They have to figure out how to save the day. Is this actually a bomb, or is it the thing, if I push the button, what happens? They have to make that decision. Technology isn't making it for them. So all the control on what actually, how the characters react is theirs versus technologies, and that's how I keep it human. If Kitty makes a mistake, she makes a mistake, and she rolls with it, and she figures out how to fix it. The technology doesn't take over, and I'm an extreme linear writer, so pretty much everything I start with the title and the first line, and I get to the end and stop, right? But the thing I know going in in anything that isn't horror or dark paranormal is my protagonist will win. I mean, I don't know how they're going to win, and I don't know who's left standing in the end, but they will prevail in some way. So that's how I do it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like cooking. You know, a little spice is great, a lot of spice is inedible, and so your characters have to be the ones who are winning the day or losing the day, not because they pull a gadget out of their pocket and it's, you know, fixes their problems. I think Neuromancer is a great example of, because that is probably the most tech heavy book I've ever read, but you never lose sight of the fact that the characters are the ones making the decisions, even to the point where you've got an AI as another character, but it's, you know, the main character is the one who's making the decisions and is driving the story forward. It's not the tech.
Ari, Les, anything you want to add?
Well, keeping the human touch. I mean, that's definitely what you have to do. People have to be able to see themselves in that story or they'll never connect to it. So you have to give them something they can relate to, some way that they can reach in and touch that person in the story and have that person touch them.
You know, Ari, you make a good point. I try to write my characters when they do encounter the technology, especially like it's an alien technology. You know, what is this? And I like to put myself in the shoes, or I hope I put the reader in my shoes so they can maybe be asking the same question, right? You know, you see this, oh, I wonder, you know, how do I investigate this? And not have the character immediately know, you know, what to do, right? You have a little bit of blundering there because I'm sure we would all blunder. So I agree. It's the relatableness of it. Even if you're in an extreme technological environment, I try to imagine how I would react being in that environment. And if I'm successful, I convey that and it gets on the paper and the reader senses that.
Jim, what about you? What about your take?
Me, I'm always looking because, again, to me, technology is a tool. And because a lot of things I do professionally, it's all about how do we as people, why do we do what we do? I mean, that's one of my driving things is about why do we do what we do? And I look at the technology often, and being somebody that works in tech and has for a very long time, how does the tech get in the way of the things that we need to do? Or how do we decide to leverage those things to improve what we're doing? And, you know, one of the things I love to include in writing is people that rely too much on the technology so that when it fails, they have to fall back on themselves and have to go and say, how do I get out of the problem? And that's one of the things that I love to do. And even when I'm writing urban fantasy or something that involves magic, I treat magic almost as a technology. When it fails, when it doesn't work right, you know, what is it the person has to do to recover from that? Or how do they deal with the lack of the piece of technology? I mean, I joked earlier about the fact that pretty much any piece of TV prior to 1999, any mystery could have been solved by simply having a cell phone. You know, the episode would have been 12 minutes long. Hey, we've got a murderer. Oh, yeah, I've got to get, oh, yeah, no, you just pick the phone. Hey, yeah, leave the house. So-and-so did it. Just leave the house. I'll be there in a few minutes. We'll round them up. It'll be fine. You know, often it's the small pieces of technology. It's not the big things. It's not the star drives. It's not the, you know, the tanks. It's the little things that really often make the biggest difference, whether it is, you know, the timed explosive or something like that. To me, it's the small pieces of technology that often make the difference as to whether they work or not. Story I'm working on right now, I have a character that is very tech heavy, very tech reliant. And before it's over with, he's going to have to face what does he do without it?
The want of a nail, the shoe is lost.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming and spending the time with me this evening. But before we get out of here, let's make sure everybody knows where to come find all these books. So, Jean, because I don't have an adult in the room, I'm going to go backwards.
Well, my name is Jean Rabe. You can find me on Facebook at Jean Rabe, and my webpage is jeanrabe.com. I tend to keep things pretty simple. I currently write the Piper Blackwell mystery series, and I love to incorporate tech. One of my secondary characters is called Zeke the Geek, and it lets me slip it right in there in every book.
Ari?
I can be found at arimckay.com, and also I am constantly on Facebook, so you can find me on Facebook as Ari McKay, and you can find me starting at the beginning of DEF CON at the Biohacking Village, and that's villageb.io if you're looking at it online. Come out and see me.
Les?
Yeah, well, with a name like Johnson, my website can't be so simple. It's lesjohnsonauthor.com. I'm also on Facebook as Les Johnson Author to distinguish from the, 10,000 other Les Johnsons that are out there. And the latest book coming out in paperback will be in July, coming up soon. It's Saving Proxima, which came out in hardcover last year, coming out in paperback this year.
Jenny?
GiniKoch.com. I'm on Twitter at Gini Koch. I'm on, like Ari, I'm on Facebook way too much. Both as Gini Koch author, First Brain Rock and Roll, author of the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series. I'm also on Pinterest. I'm going to be at San Diego Comic Con, Gen Con, and Dragon Con, and World Fantasy Con. I'm not sure when this is airing. So, hey, find me at one of those. And the latest release I have is Predator, Eyes of the Demon, which is releasing at, it's an anthology, which is releasing at the start of August, I believe. So, please buy it.
And Patrick?
I am at patrickdugan.net. On Facebook, way too much at Patrick Dugan Author. I am also at Distracted Dragon Press for my self-published, and my newest book is out now. It's called Machines and Monsters. It's the last book in the Watchers of Asteria series.
And I've had the pleasure of being your host this evening, Jim Nettles. You can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net, thespeculative-fiction-academy.com, and of course here at ConTinual. And we'll see everybody again soon.